My friends, World War III is canceled. And in this video, I'm going to give you some information that I think will be really useful in your life, as well as I'm going to give you some of my personal experiences with Iranian people. Now, over the past few days, of course, the trending has been hashtag WW3 or hashtag WWIII Roman numerals, however you want to put it. Now, here's what happened with me. I know the world was freaking out, and I'm not talking about just the United States or the Middle East. People around the world were freaking out, but it turned out to be much ado about nothing. Now, here's how this came about in my life. I woke up Monday morning, and I recorded a video for you, and I was talking about how it was my son's first birthday. And then all this news started breaking about Trump killed this Iranian general. He killed a few Iranian guys. Then the Iranians, people were freaking out. This is going to launch World War III. This is just the beginning. Even on the Golden Globes, they were talking about some actress. I saw a clip of her. She was saying how this is the spark of World War III, or the spark of this major war coming up. And it's really quite hilarious to me. But I woke up, my son's birthday, and then I recorded that video. Then my wife saw a post online from Franklin Graham, who she follows on social media, and he had a post about, let's pray for our troops headed to the Middle East, fighting for America's interests. And I normally like Franklin Graham from what little I know about him. Mainly it's whatever my wife tells me he posted on the internet. And then I kind of give her my reaction. And she wanted my reaction to that post, and I said, well, that doesn't sound like a good thing, because first of all, Trump promised he was going to be bringing troops home, not sending more there. That was one of his major promises. So my initial gut reaction was, boy, that's disappointing. And I said to her, American interests in the Middle East, what interests do we have? What is anything in there does it mean to me? Because all these wars they fought, how does this benefit the average Joe like me? Well, it doesn't, quite frankly. So I was kind of informing her about that. And before we get into some of the other stuff, there's a Patreon, not a Patreon, there's a PayPal address if you want to contribute, keep these videos going. It was just my son's birthday, so if you want to give us a little tip for that. There's also enough, if you don't want to do that, if you shop on Amazon, there's an affiliate link. Before you buy whatever you want to buy, click that link, then type in whatever you want to do. I'll get a small commission from Amazon. Won't cost you anything. But anyways, that's how I started my son's birthday. But I looked it up a little bit and just saw that there was a strike, but I've said, man, I'm not going to even bother. I don't have the time or energy to deal with this nonsense, because I've been around long enough to see that this is really just the typical nonsense, or most likely just the typical nonsense that we've been going around with for my entire life. But meanwhile, this hashtag's trending, World War III, and people are freaking out just at this one little thing. And of course, Iran is probably going to want to retaliate, and the neocons are foaming at the mouth, because this is a war that they've wanted for decades, actually. This has been part of their plans, part of their agenda. And it's kind of like, is Trump caving in? Did they get to him? Is he compromised somehow? Because it's the opposite of what he was supposed to be doing. But I saw an interesting tweet from Trump, too, where he said, because all these people were freaking out that this was the start of the war, of the new, not just a war, but a world war. And Trump had an interesting tweet about how I did this not to start a war, but to prevent a war. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because what Trump is saying himself, and sometimes it's hard to really know what he's up to, what Trump's saying is really the opposite of what the media is saying, what the public are saying, what everyone's freaking out about. So I was kind of like, who knows? But I'm like, I'm not even going to bother researching all this. I'm not going to waste my time. And I'm certainly not going to freak out about this, especially it's my son's first birthday. I'm just going to focus on that and do that. So that night, to celebrate my son's first birthday, we actually went to a Middle Eastern restaurant, and I think it was actually Iranian food. That didn't actually occur to me until just now, until recording this video. I think we had Iranian food that night. But the reason we chose that actually is my wife wanted to take pictures, and we had a birthday cake, and she thought the environment in there was a little bit nicer. I actually wanted to go to the burger joint next door, but my wife insisted that for the sake of the photos, and because the photos can last a lifetime, we went and we had that. But later that night, I ate some pork rinds, and I think that gave me food poisoning, because the next day I had food poisoning. I didn't go online. I wasn't looking at anything. I was mostly in bed just resting the whole day, getting over the food poisoning. Then yesterday I was a bit better and I could see some of the news, and I saw people were freaking out. Iran, they launched a strike on a base where Americans were staying in Iraq, and people were freaking out. Oh, even before this, I went on my Facebook, and my Facebook page, my Facebook fan page, it's up to 50,000 likes. So doing quite well, and I post these things. Sometimes it's just personal photos of me. Sometimes it's funny memes featuring me. And people sometimes, they often get hundreds, sometimes thousands of shares. So it's quite interesting. But I posted something funny on my Facebook fan page that didn't have anything, of course, to do with anything. It was, I think, a silly meme featuring me or something like that. And all these people, this is even before Iran did that missile strike on the base where Americans were supposedly staying, people were freaking out. This is actually on my son's birthday, right after all this happened, right after the strike from the U.S. on the Iranians. And people were like, please save us from World War III, help us with World War III. And keep in mind, these people commenting, they're not even Americans. So it's like my country, the United States, and these other countries evolved, Iran, and I suppose you could lump in Iraq too. It involves these few countries, not the people, not the countries where the people are commenting from. I'm going like, geez, my goodness, what are you so worried about? This doesn't even involve your country, at least not so far. And I would say if your country does get involved, it's probably pretty far away from that stage. And if your country's involved at all, it's probably very minimally. But people were freaking out, and some people, these weren't people just trolling or just trying to leave funny comments, I could tell. People were genuinely concerned. And I said to I replied to one comment and got a lot of, my comment got a lot of thumbs up. And they said that, basically I said, this is not the place to worry and fearmonger about stuff that probably isn't even close to happening, at least not yet. So I couldn't believe these people freaking out. Then just yesterday I saw the strike that Iran did on the base where Americans were supposedly staying, and the media and all over Twitter they're saying 30 Americans were dead, and that's because of Trump. And I was thinking, well, that's really bad. And then I saw what Trump said on Twitter, and Trump, he always speaks very positively, and a lot of people don't understand why he does this. He's very into the power of positivity and the power of positive thinking, and the idea that you can speak things into existence, and you can at least potentially have happen in real life. What you're saying is going to happen. He believes in the power of the words coming out of your mouth. And this is a very spiritual principle if you understand where Trump grew up, going to church. His minister wrote the book The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale. He was one of the leaders in this positive thought movement. And if you listen to the way Trump talks and behaves, you can see he's very into that stuff. He's very law of attraction stuff. So a lot of people, they think that he's doing it because he's stupid or something. Trust me, Trump knows what he's doing, and he really believes in these things on a very deep level. I think in many ways, he might be the most spiritual president we've ever had, and that's not to mean he's spiritual from a traditional Christian sense, but he does have a sense of there's other forces that are not understood, and there's ways to use them. So Trump has this very positive tweet after this base was attacked with missiles, and he was basically like, we just had a base that was hit with missiles. The U.S. military's #1. Yeah, everything's great. Pro-America, America. Like, and I thought, well, that's a very strange thing while they're currently assessing the situation, that he has this celebratory tweet almost. It's like potentially some of our guys are killed or injured. I think he said there is no no casualties so far, but they're assessing the situation. But it seemed overly positive. So I was kind of thinking, well, Trump, either he's going a little bit crazy here and being a little bit extreme with the positive talk, or he knows something that the average public don't know. And sure enough, it comes out there was no American casualties. They got out of there. They had advanced warning. Either they expected it to happen, they foresaw that that's what they were going to do, or Iraq tipped them off, or Iran actually called Iraq and said, hey, tell the U.S. this is going to happen, but you don't have to tell them we said that. Just get them out of there. We got to do something to show some kind of force back. So it looks like that's kind of the end of it, and even the neocons like Ben Shapiro, they're very happy that this might be over, and I think the reason why is because Iran threatened to destroy Israel if the United States keeps attacking them. They didn't say, hey, we're going to fight back against the United States. It's like, hey, we're going to go attack Israel. And then all of a sudden, people like Shapiro, they're like, oh, hey now, let's de-escalate things. We don't want a war. When before, that's what these guys have been fighting for a long time, is war. But it looks like, and it's a little bit early to tell now, that Trump actually achieved peace with Iran in a very strange roundabout way. Maybe he is playing 4D chess. Like I said, it's all too early to tell. But here's what this means to you. And I was telling my wife this earlier, like giving her the update because she was kind of asking about it. And I said, geez, look at all these people freaking out about everything. Because my wife was like, it's almost like this whole thing was for show. And I said, yeah, and look at all the people that freaked out, people trying to fear-monger, they were worrying themselves, trying to get other people worked out and worrying. And I'm like, to me, it's nothing. At the worst, it's just the usual bull crap. And certainly, I've lived through a lot scarier times in my lifetime. I remember 9/11. 9/11 in my lifetime is the scariest time in the United States, probably the scariest time since Pearl Harbor was attacked, since World War II, at least since Vietnam probably. But after 9/11, I remember when they resumed classes, because I was in college at the time, one of my professors, who was co-head of the department, the film department, as a film major, he told us, all the guys in this room, they're going to be drafted, get ready, you're going to war. Well, of course, none of that actually happened. And if it would have came to it, I would have did it, but it never even came anywhere close to that. So this guy freaked out everyone in the class, especially the guys, telling them they're all going to be drafted into the military and go to war, when none of that even came close to happening. He was just fear-mongering, playing worst-case scenario, worrying about things that might happen in the future and telling people this is a definite reality. But I didn't get worked up. By the way, about 9/11, even though that was the scariest time in the United States, it was also the most beautiful time in the United States, because for the first time in my lifetime, we were really a united people. People saw that there was a larger threat, a bigger enemy, and they quit bickering amongst themselves so much to focus on something. So for maybe a year after 9/11 happened, till everything fell apart again, in the United States, it was a beautiful time. People were very united, and we had a much more cohesive, unified society. So it was also the most beautiful time to be in the United States after that. But that was certainly a scarier time. So for this, I didn't even sweat it. And you had all these people, too, even I think the actor Robert De Niro, they were doing this tweet on Twitter where they were saying, please, Jack, kick Trump off of Twitter, because he might use your platform to start World War III. Think of how ridiculous that is. So all these people stressed out, they worried, they tried to stress other people out in our society, worrying about something that probably wasn't too likely to happen in the first time. And here I am, I'm just over here, relaxing, then getting sick with food poisoning that I got from, I think, pork rinds that I bought off the street. So that's another lesson. Don't buy food off the street from some rando. And I want to give you my experiences. I don't know much about Iran, the people, or their culture. Now, one thing I do know is supposedly in the country of Iran, if you're like an Olympic wrestler it's like being like Michael Jordan over there. You're a celebrity. You're a big star athlete. And in the United States, they don't care anything about amateur wrestling. So that's one thing I have to say that's very positive about Iranian culture. And now I have only experienced, that I can recollect, ever dealing with two Iranians. Now, they're both kind of similar guys, so I'll only focus on the one that I work for more. I worked for both these guys. One I worked for quite a while. One I just did a couple gigs for. They were both from Iran, and they were not the majority of what Iranians are, I need to state. They were both Jewish. And I remember I was telling this guy that owned the gym that I went to, a Korean guy that owned this gym in Los Angeles, and I could do a whole nother video about this guy and his issues, not to trash him, because there's most people in this world, they're good people. I don't know if that's 70%, 80%, 90% of people. They're basically good people, but we all have issues. This guy, he had his own issues. He could probably do a video about me saying I have whatever issues I had at the time. But I was telling him my dilemma. I was working as an apartment building manager in Los Angeles for this guy that I was under him directly, but his family owned this company that they owned all this real estate. They were from Iran. They were a Jewish family, and I was telling him about how crazy this guy was, my boss, this Iranian guy, about how unethical he is. This guy wanted us to actually break the law for him. He asked me on multiple times. This guy was also the cheapest guy that you could ever imagine. This guy drove around in a Range Rover, but he would want to argue with people for $1. If there was $1, he would dispute people over it. And I was thinking, man, $1? You drive a freaking Range Rover. What's that going to buy you? Maybe a third or a quarter of a gallon of gas for that big thing that you drive around? How much does that cost you to fill up? So he would argue with people over ridiculous sums of money, and he was such most unethical guy I've ever met. But I was telling this Korean gym owner about this, and he said about this Iranian guy that I worked for, and he said, "Is this guy Jewish?" And hey, don't get angry at me. I'm not saying this. I'm telling you what the Korean gym owner said. But he said, "Is this guy Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah, he is actually." And he goes, "Oh man, those Jews from Iran, they are the worst." And he was like, in his mind, he was educating me, because I was a naive guy from North Dakota, and it's very true, I was a naive guy from North Dakota, and I'm actually thankful that I worked for this guy, because he taught me a lot of lessons about dealing with people. And most people, when I was growing up in North Dakota, even in business deals, they're typically fairly honest and straightforward. And dealing with this guy that was my boss, I didn't even know people like that existed in this world. He was such a scumbag, this guy. And like I said, he wanted me to actually break the law for him on his behalf. I think in his thinking was, well, if a law needs to be broken, I'll get one of my building managers to break the law. That way, if someone's caught, they did the crime, not me. So he was doing all this crazy stuff. I remember I used to go into their office in Beverly Hills too, and it was all foreigners working for him. I was basically the only American. It was mostly Filipinos and Koreans. And there's this one Korean guy that worked at the front desk, and he had this Jewish cloth on the desk, and then there was the holy book, I believe the Talmud. I didn't know what any of that crap was at that time. It is funny to me, and I said to John, the Korean guy whose desk it was, I said, "Did you convert to Judaism?" And he just gives me this look like he was forced to be put on his desk. And I'm like, here these people are. They're trying to give this illusion that they're these religious people, and it's all bullcrap. All their religion, probably, I don't know much about their religion, but they're putting on this air. And some Christians do that, fair enough, too. They'll put out the Bible, but they're the biggest scumbags. Those are the people you got to really watch out for, that try and show you their holiness or how religious they are. But this guy was such a terrible guy, one of the worst people, but it's like I was being polished to deal with bigger things in life and when I have to deal with people like that in the future. So I'm actually very thankful for the whole experience. This guy helped sharpen me and taught me some much needed lessons. And I remember when I went home, this is how I became the apartment building manager. I came back home to the building I was living in, and there was a sign on the door. And something just happened where I needed money too, by the way. There was a sign on the door saying, "I'm no longer your building manager," signed Mike. Mike was the guy that got me to rent the apartment there. A super nice guy, about the only other white guy that lived in the entire neighborhood where this building was in Los Angeles. And I called the office then. I said, "Hey, if he's no longer the manager, who is the manager? Do you got one?" And they said, "Actually, we don't have one now." I'm like, "Well, can I apply?" And then I went in and I met with this guy that's telling you about, the Iranian guy. And this guy, man, just the negotiation process, this guy tried to almost talk me into doing it for basically free. And it was such a time-consuming, in-depth job, and he wanted me to do it for like $200 a month. Totally insane. But anyways, I go and I get the keys. They tell me, "Oh, go." The former manager still has the keys. Get them from him. So I knock on his door and I said, "Hey, Mike, I'm the new manager. They gave me the job." And he looks at me. He's like, and he goes in and gets me the keys and he goes, "Man, you are going to learn a lot doing this job." And boy, that guy was right. So I'm ultimately thankful for the whole experience. And the other Iranian guy that I did a couple of gigs for, it was kind of the same thing, but I don't want to be too redundant. So anyways, if you like my channel, my content, or if you want to give us a tip, since my son just had a birthday, which we talked about in the last video, the PayPal address is down below, as is the affiliate link for Amazon. So have fun until next time, and don't stress out so much over every little news event. Don't live in this constant state of fear. Until next time, my friends.